Can you share any experience?
They just limit themselves.
This is very dry, or this
I also struggled with time management. If you like challenges
related to interview.
for people's person, in a lot of organizations now, CFOs are becoming the CEO.
Moved from India to UAE. Hey, hi Swati, how are you?
I'm good, Asif. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm sure this conversation that we are having, it will be useful to a lot of aspiring finance professionals. And this will help a lot of people. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolute pleasure.
So let's start by knowing you better. So I know you've been working in finance for a while, more than a decade, and you've been in various roles, in compliance related roles and in FP&A. So if you can let our listeners and viewers know a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Okay. So I'm a chartered accountant, and I'm born and brought up in India. All of my education, I did it back in Calcutta. While doing my chartered accountancy, of course, there's a 3 year of articleship, which I did from Deloitte, Calcutta. So I started in a very traditional chartered accountancy role, which is statutory audit. But 3 years down the line, I realized that that is not something I want to do for the rest of my life. And so, even though I started working as an assistant manager after I qualified as a chartered accountant, I decided to sit for my campus recruitment and then got hired in Coca-Cola. And that's where my journey of business partnering, FP&A sort of began. I started as a management trainee, and it was a 6 month stint where we got exposure to different parts of the business, different functions, right from sales to marketing to supply chain to operations, everything, along with, of course, finance. And finance, both fields of finance, which is financial controlling and business partnering. And that made me realize where I want to build my career, and that was business partnering. As an individual, I loved talking to people. I loved business. Like, I loved understanding different aspects of the business, and I knew that I couldn't work by myself, which is typically what chartered accountants are expected to do in their traditional job roles. And so business partnering sort of became the go-to roles for me. I started working with Coca-Cola in a factory, so I did supply chain finance and also a bit of controlling, which is accounts consolidation, etc. After that, I moved to Nestle. I had a brief stint in Nestle where I was the finance business partner for marketing team. The idea there was to help marketing team get the best bang for the buck or best ROI for the marketing investments that they do. That gave me a lot of exposure to different brands, brand building, how finance can be really good, let's say, gatekeeper to sort of control the investments or put those investments in the right place, which can actually get a right ROI for the business. But it was a very short stint because all of the roles that I did previously, I was preparing to get into FP&A. And why I say FP&A? Because for me, FP&A is sort of the convergence of all the different roles of finance. Because in order to be a good FP&A manager, and that's something that I always envisioned myself, you needed right business knowledge. You needed different, let's say, knowledge of different functions, and that's what I did for the last, let's say, 3-4 years, along with articleship, which was an audit, and that helped me quickly transition into a good FP&A manager role, which is what I did in Mars. And that was pretty much my stint in India. I was the FP&A manager in Mars, handling the chocolate as well as the confectionery business. After that, I decided to move to UAE because of some personal reason. And I started my career again in Amazon as finance business partner, which was pretty much FP&A for their 3P business or the marketplace business. It's literally 50% of the Amazon MENA business, which is UAE, Saudi, and Egypt. So I was handling that entire business by myself. That obviously was a good exposure to e-commerce side, because all this while I've spent my career in FMCG, and that too in food industry. But I did not like it. I wanted to get back to FMCG, and so Kraft Heinz happened. I came back to Kraft Heinz, started handling commercial finance, again business partnering, but commercial finance in Kraft Heinz had a big aspect or component of FP&A, which is which is budgeting and planning, right? So even like whatever you call it, whether you call it commercial finance, you call it FP&A, you call it I don't know, budgeting, forecasting, whatever you call it, it's or controllership. It's pretty much the same thing as long as the crux remains the same. So last couple of years I spent in again in business partnering and FP&A, commercial finance sort of role. And this year I moved to leading finance transformation again, as which is an extension of FP&A. So what FP&A does is essentially forecasting, budgeting, and all of them, and finance transformation help the department to do it better by bringing the right tools, by bringing the right resources, by setting up the right processes. So just stepping back from day-to-day work, and then also looking at a big picture and trying to bring it into smaller, let's say, smaller, more doable sort of activities, and automating a lot of the processes, because FP&A team spends a lot of time doing manual Excel jugglery, which can be really simplified and automated. So that's what I do right now. So yeah, that's pretty much about my journey in India and now in UAE. Based out of UAE, I look at the EMEA region. So I get exposed to different business units, different countries, different culture, and that's like one of the most exciting part about my job right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, if I want to go back to your first move from audit, you're working in audit with Deloitte as an intern, and then you moved into a role with Coca-Cola, which was a management trainee sort of a role. So
Yeah.
how did you? I know you mentioned about the campus placement. So, what how was that experience like with Coca-Cola, and do you feel that because of you working in those different areas of the business, or at least in of learning about different parts of the business, that helped you understand business better, help you understand or laid a good foundation for your future roles? So can you let us know a little bit more about how did you make that transition? Somebody who's looking to do that right now, say who's a fresher chartered accountant, how can they do that if they want to?
That's actually a very good question. And, when I was in Deloitte, 3 years, I actually audited only one client. That was like let's say, it was a listed company called Tata Steel. And the company, obviously, because it was listed company, had a lot of regulatory compliances that we had to sort of follow throughout the year, right? And then we had tax audits, we had limited reviews, we had full compliance reviews, annual audit, etc., right? So to be honest, literally through audit, I could never have learned about the business. So what I liked doing was to read about a lot of stuff. I like to liked at that point of time, and I still like to keep myself updated, not just in the industry that I'm working for, but in every industry. So one of the things, that I feel a lot of young professionals, they don't do is that they just limit themselves to a particular industry or a particular field. If you talk to someone who's in FMCG about e-commerce, they would not know anything about it, and vice versa for that matter. While I actually thought I was different. And that sort of gave me the edge. Even if I did not have any idea or experience working in FMCG company, I spoke to a lot of people who worked in FMCG company even before going to the interviews. I researched a lot about the company, the cultural aspect of the company, and how I could be a good fit. The other thing that I did in order to sort of land the job was to show what skills I had learned during my audit and what are those transferable skills. And I say again, transferable skills in big quotes, which I can take to the other organization and do anything anything that they would throw at me. And I think that sort of made a lot of difference, because I was competing with a lot of rank holders. I was competing with a lot of people who knew better English, let's say, or who had done articleship. Plus, there is something called you work in a company also, or in an organization also as a part of CA curriculum for 1 year, which is called industrial training. So a lot of people came from those backgrounds and they couldn't crack it. And the only reason was because which I could think of at that point in time, was that they only studied about that particular organization, or they could only answer very limited question, and how they couldn't show what skills they would bring to the organization. So that's something that I feel is really important as a professional.
Now, when you made that switch from Coca-Cola to Nestle, can you share any experience related to interview? How did you manage that? How did you prepare for that interview? If you
Yeah.
can share any particular instance, maybe not only interview, but anything else that you put in the work. What work did you put in to move from Coca-Cola, which was a trainee role, or your first role after CA, to your first full-time job at Nestle?
So look, I actually talk about like typical challenges somebody faces when you transition from a typical audit or accounting role into a business partnering role, and that business partnering, I'll particularly, let's say, focus on FP&A. I think the biggest challenge that most of the people face is that mindset shift, right? When you are in audit or accounting, you have a very retrospective, compliance-driven approach, right? You're looking back at past data. You have a particular checklist to follow, and you think that if the checklist is right, you go ahead with it. However, when it comes to FP&A, it is the strategic, let's say, mindset that you need to have. You need to be forward thinking. When I used to read something, I used to always think, you know, uh, why did that strategy come in place? So just not read a news, but go a little bit behind the news, research a bit more, and that sort of helped me gain a little bit of business understanding. And even now, when I interview somebody, I always look at the fact whether they have that business understanding or not. And of course, they will not know all the answers, but the idea is to show that analytical thinking, right? Uh, in an organization, you will be always thrown with some or the other challenges, and FP&A as a role will always be at the forefront from finance side to be thrown these challenges. You have macroeconomic factors, you have microeconomic factors, you have your business challenges, margin challenges, etc., etc. So being agile and adaptable to change becomes very, very important when you want to build a career there. Other than that, look, obviously it's long back. At that point of time, there were not too much of technology. I would say if I knew Excel, I would do a job pretty well, right? So knowing Excel is very, very important. However, if people are looking to make a career in an organization, like in an industry, PowerPoint knowledge also comes in very handy, because you will be expected to create presentations in as a part of your FP&A role, and obviously industry specific knowledge. So a lot, even after doing so much of research, so much of study, I felt my industry knowledge was very limited. So going and talking to people, just sitting with my managers and just having a chat about, how is this industry going, what are the things we can do, what do they think, with senior leader with different functions, helped me gain a lot of exposure into the industry, even before I interviewed for an FMCG position. And then after I came, to as a management trainee, and then got converted into a full-time employee, I there were few things, of course, which I did not have working in audit, because again, as I said, audit is very, like, you have a checklist to follow, and especially if you work in Big Four, you are not you don't think outside of the box, because you don't have to, right? It's a compliance driven role. So I really found a few things to be very, very difficult, which is understanding the business. Of course, I understood broadly, but why are certain decisions taken when they are taken by different function? Like, sometimes you would feel, why is marketing doing this? It makes no sense financially. But a lot of these decisions are not taken only for looking at a bottom line. A lot of the decisions are not taken on a short term, for a short term. You look at it from a long term perspective. So understanding that business sort of took a bit of time and made me very uncomfortable initially at the start. In audit, I never had to do financial modeling. Right. And then when I came to FP&A, I had to do complex financial modeling, put formulas which I had never put, learn about them, learn the logic of them. So that took a bit of time. And additionally, I also struggled with time management, because with audit, you have certain deadlines. You look at the deadlines, you just follow the deadline, right, to the T. But with FP&A, of course, you have deadline, plus you will be thrown random challenges. So how do you sort of balance the two became very, very difficult. There were times when I was working all 7 days, 12 hours, 14 hours at the start. But yeah, that was a bit difficult then, but I would say that really helped me to sort of convert my mindset from auditor to an FP&A professional. And one last thing that probably sort of helps now also is to work on my communication skills. I think um, when you are in audit, you're pretty by yourself. You work, you go to the client, or you just email a client that you need data. In If you are in accounting, you have your system, you download the data, and that's it. You're pretty much working within your team, sometimes all by yourself, and you don't have anybody else. So you don't really need a very good communication skill. But with FP&A, you have interaction from sales team to the supervisor to the PA to HR to multiple departments, right? So having a strong communication skill became very, very important. So these were few things that made me uncomfortable, but slowly working on them was what really, really helped me to transition completely to an FP&A professional.
Got it. So let me quickly summarize what you said in the last couple of minutes. So things that made you uncomfortable and you had to work on were on the mindset is one.
Yeah.
Doing more about the business is the second thing that you mentioned. And you also talked about technology, which is Excel, PowerPoint, which is important, and finally the communication skills, which you need to work on or which you felt you needed to work on. So does that summarize?
I would also add like time management, because not
Yeah.
like work by clock, because that's what a lot of individuals, when they work in accounting and auditing, they stick to a particular
Yes.
time clock. That's something that I would be open to when I think of transitioning.
Yeah, I think that was something that I also found a little different because in in an accounting audit role, you follow the calendar very
Yeah,
rigidly, or you don't have to use a lot of your brain to figure out, okay, what do I do next?
yeah,
But when you come to more of a business role or a FP&A role, then it is not very straightforward. It's a little bit ambiguous, and
yeah,
you take some time to get used to it. So initially, you might find, okay, I'm not doing anything this week, but you may not know, okay, this is some time that you can use for your preparing for your next week or your
yeah,
next reporting cycle, next forecast cycle, which is typically, yeah. So there are more cycles. I mean, compared to accounting in terms of knowing what you do next.
yeah.
So I can relate. How about now comparing to audit and FP&A? If I have to ask you now because you've done both, what is more interesting now? This is very subjective. A lot of people want to move from accounting audit to FP&A because of the reason they say this is very dry or this is very
Yeah.
monotonous. So how would you compare now working in FP&A and audit, which is very subjective? It might be different for different people. I want to know your opinion on, is FP&A as interesting as audit, or is it, or audit is more dry compared to FP&A? I want to know very specifically what are your views on that.
So look, as you all rightly said, it is very subjective, right? So I
Yes.
know people who loved audit when they were auditing, and they have made partners, right, or senior
Yes.
directors in last 12 years because they had the passion for audit. Even
Yeah.
if it is dry, even if there's not much to do, this is what I think. For them, they have a lot to do, and that's why they have had a tremendously good career in that particular field. For me personally, I felt it's a bit too dry. It's There is not much to do unless you reach a certain level. And as a person, I always liked variety. I always liked challenges, and so I felt that it is not a particular department or let's say function where I would want to build a career. If I had to choose audit, I would definitely choose internal audit or controls than statutory audit, because I feel statutory audit is a bit more compliance driven than people driven. And personally, I like creating things. I like growing things. And that's not something I felt I could do in audit. Additionally, I like working with people, which I also said at the start of the conversation. So, building a career in business partnering helped me do that. Like, I always call myself a people's person. I don't know if that's even a word, but but for me, it's about what we can build together rather than I can sit in a room in an office and build it. So that's how I would call it. But again, both are equally interesting. Depends on your interest area.
Definitely, it is very subjective. So depending on your interest, what do you want to do in life in say next 5 years? It all depends on that.
Yeah.
So
Another thing is, if you just want a stable life, right? You know what you want, what you have to do tomorrow, then Tuesday, then Wednesday, then Thursday, etc., etc. I think audit and accounting are great field for you. You know when you have to cut off, when you have the deadline, etc., etc. It's a great field for you. So if you're very well organized, I think audit and accounting are better field for you. But if you like chaos in your life, if you like challenges, tomorrow
Mhm.
you know that you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I feel business partnering roles are better suited for you.
Got it. And very related topic to what we talked about. Now we talk about work-life balance. So how do you feel is work-life balance in audit compared to FP&A? Was audit more hectic? And it might be because of the Big Four, but we
Yeah,
can talk about that and maybe other, other audit experiences as well. So
yeah,
how was work-life balance in audit? How is it in FP&A? How would you compare the two?
yeah. Look, first of all, I hate the concept of work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I feel like whatever needs priority at a certain point of time needs to be on a higher side of the balance, which means I like a term called work-life integration, how we can integrate the two together so that
Mm-hmm.
we can do justice to both. And that's how what I have followed throughout my life. Now, coming specific to work-life balance in audit, because I was in Deloitte, my life was pretty hectic. And also I was working for a very big organization called Tata Steel, right? Because of so many cycles, because of so many, let's say, cities or states that reported into the head office, and the compliance requirement, the regulatory requirement.
Yeah.
It got pretty hectic. I remember I got only 3 months to study for my final exams. There were times when we were working on Saturdays and Sundays. You don't expect articles to do that in other, let's say mid-size organization. uh, Additionally, the challenge was I was only doing stat audit, which sort of after a point got very monotonous.
Mm-hmm.
While in smaller organizations you have the advantage of doing multiple departments or multiple functions, multiple activities, multiple clients, etc., etc. So I feel that's a different type of experience. I'm not going to say one is better than the other, or etc., etc., but
Mm-hmm.
it's a different experience. While on a brighter side, I got a lot of corporate experience. I knew how to talk to people already. I knew how to what corporate is like. So when I went into corporate, actually it was not a shocker for me. It felt very, very normal, right? Now it comes to FP&A. There is no set time, right? It depends on how much you can automate the process. It depends on how much you can standardize the process. It depends on how stable your business environment is. For example, I am based in a country in the Middle East, right? Middle East, as you would know, always has some or the other thing happening. Sometimes there are economic instability, sometimes there are political instability, sometimes there are geopolitical instability and things like that, right? Uh, so you and I also handle a much bigger area, which is EMEA, right? So it's I have Russia, I have Poland under me. So a lot of these markets undergo changes very rapidly, right? And there is something or the other that keeps happening. So you always have to be on your toes. You can't really follow a certain set pattern wherein you can clock out at 5 p.m. and clock in at 9 a.m. the next day. There are times when you have to work late night. There are times when you can go back home, on time. So it really depends on the market that you're handling, the size of business you are handling, etc. For any business partnering role, it depends on how demanding your CFO is, how demanding your business partners are, how much reliance they have on you. So if you are able to build yourself as a credible business partner, you you will not have a great work-life balance, but that's the fun. You also grow very fast. You are on a much faster track to make a CFO. Sometimes in a lot of organizations now, CFOs are becoming the CEOs, which was never heard of earlier when finance was a more traditional role. You will never hear somebody who has only done audit and accounting in their life to make the CFO. In no organization. Again, maybe their ambition is not to become a CFO, and their ambition is to become a partner. Their ambition is to become the head of accounting, and that's okay. But my ambition was always to become a CFO, and I think this path was a better suited path for my interest area or my ambition.
Now that you talked about UAE, can you let us know how was your FP&A experience different in India versus UAE? Did you find any similarities or any differences which you want to highlight, or any experiences that you want to share?
Yeah. So look, I'll tell you some common things which, I think no matter what geography we are in, is always going to stay the same for any professional. One of them is that all the markets are going to be influenced by global economic trends. So whether you talk about India, the devaluation of the currency, for example, dollar used to be 60 like 5 years back, now it's 74, 75. It does impact when you work in a multinational environment, right? Plus, even if you work in a local conglomerate which has exposure to foreign currencies through foreign loans and stuff like that, it impacts your business, right? Secondly, every FP&A is trying to bring in new technology, advanced technology, things like predictive analytics, visualization tools like Tableau and Power BI, etc., etc. So that's across the world, right? And then everybody now wants FP&A to help with strategic growth, efficiency, and risk management. Earlier, FP&A would only deal with forecasting, and the numbers would come from sales. They would just, let's say, consolidate the number, quickly run a P&L, and then just show it to the management. Now the role has evolved to be the driver for strategic growth, not to take the back seat, but to drive or to bat from the front. How to drive efficiency, so find avenues from efficiency and risk management. Now coming to how I would say, things are very different. I would not say it's very, very different, but there are, of course, few differences that I would see in the Middle East. One of them is regulatory environment. Now, when I say regulatory environment, Middle East is generally more liberal, right? In Dubai, for example, or UAE, there is no income tax. Corporate tax just got introduced from this year, sorry. Right. And they are more liberal in terms of their taxation structure, in terms of their accounting requirements, which is very, very different when it comes to India. There are few companies which doesn't even have to pay taxes if they are located in free zones, right? So that makes ease of doing business, and hence the FP&A part of things much easier. So I remember when I had to do a value chain back in India, because of different states having different taxation, like different, let's say, VAT and CST and stuff, it would be a disaster if you were handling multiple states. While in this part of the world, it's relatively very, very simple. You have just one VAT. Then I think economic structure. So you will not find very complex businesses here. Most of the businesses are trading businesses. Because this region was very dependent on oil, right? Now they are diversifying, but the modus operandi of business is pretty simple compared to, I would say, in India. Other than that, it's a very homogeneous market. So when I say homogeneous, in India, if you go from one state to another country, it's like going from one country to another country. While, in UAE, the population is pretty much what they want is the similar thing. When you go from UAE to Oman, you go from UAE to Saudi, of course, the per capita income is going to be different, but it's not as complex as, let's say, back in India. So that was another thing which made transition relatively simpler. Other than that, dollar pegging. So in UAE, we have dirhams. Dirham is pegged to dollar. So the currency fluctuation doesn't impact you as much as it impacts India, right? Which is what I was mentioning earlier also. And this region obviously is sort of the hub for investment. So people have money. The people are ready to invest in the country. Not just people, companies globally are ready to invest to set up offices here and things like that. Which means even if they are taking losses for now, they are okay to do that because this market gives them access to Africa, and that's an unexplored territory.
Okay.
EMEA is essentially the headquarter for Africa for most of the companies, and these are slightly, I would say, little bit different to what I had observed in India. In India, I think market was very complex because you had diverse consumer base. I mean, I would not see here 1 rupee sachet or 1 dirham sachet of shampoo being sold. While in India, you would still see that as the highest selling SKU for every brand, and just to exist in the business, they'll have to do that. So I would say in this side of the world, FP&A is relatively simpler. So if somebody wants to move here with an Indian experience, they would not have a very difficult time. In fact, it'd be relatively easier for them to grow and make a good career in FP&A here.
Got it. Got it. Now that you mentioned about it, so uh, if I have to ask, how should, if somebody wants to aspire to move from India to UAE, maybe in FP&A, maybe in any other finance role, are there any specific things that they should do to prepare? What would be your advice? Maybe in just 2 or 3 uh, bullet points.
I'll mention 3 bullet points, and that's what I tell everyone who reach out to me: resilience. This
Mm-hmm.
market, and I will explain why I say resilience. This market is sort of a hub to the entire uh, Asia and Europe region, right? So everybody wants to move here.
Mm-hmm.
There is the European markets are not doing that great,
Yep.
right? And what that means is a lot of people from there also want to move here because this is a very stable market. There is no tax, and the lifestyle is good. India, I think everybody wants to move out of India, I would say, because they just don't like staying in India for some reason, despite the fact that India is the most growing market at this point in time in terms of numbers. So what that does is it makes it very difficult to find a job, which brings me to my second point: networking. I think one of the challenge that I see with young individuals right now is that they only reach out to you when they need something,
Yep.
and they do not have good communication skills on even how to reach out. When people reach out to me for mentoring and let's asking about how to find jobs in the Middle East, I literally have to give them a template on how they should approach people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I see that, and the reason I say this is because I see that when they reach out to me, they will just attach their resume and tell me, "Can you help me find a job?" I get such hundreds of messages every day, and I'm telling you, it's not just me. Everybody in UAE in a decent position gets these messages. I always tell them, think about this. If I were you or you were me, would you respond to such messages, such cold calling? Cold calling works, but it doesn't work when you're trying to move geographies. It doesn't work when you're trying to change your jobs. It may work for some individuals, but 99.99% it is not going to work. So that's the second point. And third point I would say is finding the right mentor, uh, which will help you understand what is the reason you want to move to UAE.
Yep.
What happens is when people reach out and they think that the moment they move from India to Dubai, their salary is going to increase 3 times. Okay. It used to happen when Indian salaries were like 5 lakh, 7 lakh. Now Indian salaries have massively increased. So what that does is they get a massive shocker that I was expecting something in my head and I'm getting peanuts because the cost of living is expensive here. And this market really appreciates people with the experience of this market, which means when you come down from India, you might have to take a step back, right? And I did that. I came at the same level which I was in. I didn't get promoted to come here because I changed my company did not send me. I came at the same level. It's just that I got a higher amount of money that I was making in India, and that's 4 years back. Things have even further deteriorated because of more influx of people than it was 4 years back, right? This is something that people don't understand, and hence finding the right mentor who will help you understand, are your reasons of moving justified? and show you the right picture, and then also help you to make that move. That's something that these are the three things I would say very, very important if anybody's wanting to move out of India at this point in time.
Understanding that it's not going to be easy, it might take time.
Yeah.
Working on their communication skills, not reaching out, cold calling. Networking would be
The right
something.
word, yeah.
Also, finding a good mentor. So those are other things that you advise. How was your experience transitioning? So did you move with a job from India,
Yeah.
or go there or and find a job there?
No, I did not move without a job. I knew that I'm not going to. So I was in a very comfortable job in India. I was working with Mars, which is one of the best places to work in India. I was doing FP&A, which I wanted to do. I was growing very well, but I had to move because of some personal reason, and I didn't want to move without a job. So I got a call from Amazon, and then I interviewed for the position, and I got a job, and then I decided to move. But
Got
I know a lot of people come to Dubai with the tourist visa, stay here for 3 months and look for jobs. Some of them manage to get it, some of them don't. But that's another thing that people do. Now, if you ask me whether I would advise people for it, I would want them to do a few things before they come. But yeah, that also is a strategy that can work for a few people.
Got it. Got it. Okay, now let me come back to FP&A, what we were initially talking about. So, how would you advise somebody who's now working in audit and they want to say, prepare their resume? What are the few skills that they should highlight which are transferable from audit to FP&A?
Analytical skills. I know that in audit you might not be 100% analytical, but then you have your education to show how you applied in some projects, etc. You know how you were analytical, so you could do that. Because I am, and this is with the assumption that somebody within 3 to 5 years of their career would want to move to FP&A, right? If somebody wants to move after 10, 15 years, I am honestly not sure if it's going to be very easy. So let's keep this answer to somebody within 5 years of work experience, right? Secondly, attention to details. And when I say attention to details in audit, that is one of the most important skill that you develop, which really helped me personally when I transitioned into FP&A role. Because in FP&A, you handle the value of the data that you handle is very big, right? So how you are able to drive information or drive that story or message from the lowest, from the smallest of number, and the trend is very, very important. So catching that trend or catching that influx point will really come in when you build that attention to detail. So that's something that you can show, which is your transferable skill and would be really helpful, really be helpful when you move to FP&A. And thirdly, your risk assessment and management skills, in the sense, if you have handled a team in audit, that can come as handy when you move to FP&A. If you have an experience of handling risk or risk assessment, that's something that you would also be doing in FP&A. So I think these are 3 or 4 skills that I would say that people actually develop in audit and accounting, and they can really show projects where they have demonstrated the skills, use these words in their resume to stand out and sell themselves in front of the recruiter.
Analytical skills, being able
And
to manage teams, attention to detail are few things that you. What exactly would be risk assessment? So I know there might be few different definitions. What, according to you, is in very simple words so that people can understand? Somebody who's not worked in risk assessment, has worked in audit, may not even know what is risk assessment, or maybe just in few simple words. What exactly do you mean by that?
so for example, how in audit you find out, something is not right, in the sense that the payables have increased a lot because of XYZ customers where they have not been paid for a very long time, or receivables are very high because of XYZ reasons. What is that? You foresee that you will not be paid in this quarter, or you will these are going to become bad debts, right? So that's risk assessment in very, very simple term, just so that people can understand. Now, when it comes to FP&A, you can have the same thing. You see that your customers are not paying you, and why they are not paying you? Because of XYZ reason. Did somebody go and talk to them? Did the sales guys go and talk to them? Maybe they've become bankrupt, or maybe there's something in the news. Maybe the currency has fluctuated, so, and your contract was in local currency and your currency is not pegged to dollar. So imagine in India, if you were supposed to receive 1 million INR, and you have to pay let's say $50,000, because of the currency fluctuation, your $50,000 equivalent could become from 7 lakh to 8 lakh or 10 lakh, right? Which means the whole amount of money that you would have received and paid can become, how do I say this? Like can become equal. So that your profitability might get impacted, your cash in hand might get impacted. So being able to identify those risks and trends become very important when and how you can show that as an example when you're trying to transition to FP&A.
Got it. Okay, so being able to basically identify anything that is going to cause
business disruption.
Yes, in maybe so you identified something, and if you can identify it right now and then do something about it, and you can make a difference. Now, what I wanted to ask more about is the FP&A interview part. So, how do they prepare for the interview? Before I go to that, are there any, one of the biggest challenges people face from accounting is just to get the interview. They tell me, once I get the interview, I'll definitely be able to crack it. But getting that interview call or getting shortlisted is one of the biggest challenges. So, any particular advice on how they can get the first interview call or maybe the first few interview calls when they are in audit for a commercial role or a FP&A role?
The only thing that works, at least in Dubai, is networking. The other thing that I would also advise is, look, you are completely changing your field, right? So if you were a manager or a senior manager in audit or accounting, you're not going to get the same position in FP&A. So being flexible and understanding that it's okay, even if you have to start as a senior financial analyst, do that, because the way you will grow will be very different to someone who's much younger than you and lesser experience will grow. Think about your career of 30-40 years. If you have to even step back for 1 or 2 years, will it create so much of a difference? So don't apply for, again, I'm not saying do not apply for, let's say, relevant roles, but do not get disheartened if you don't get calls for similar experience roles, because if you were the hiring manager, you wouldn't hire an FP&A professional into audit with 5 years of experience as FP&A manager and not an audit manager.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it's exactly the same thing. And coming back to the first point that I mentioned, networking, I think it is very important to start talking to other FP&A managers, other FP&A professionals, if you want to make a career in FP&A or whatever business partnering field, and make friends with them, understand what they do on a daily basis, keep track of the fact whether there are any open roles, because even if you have an audit experience, but somebody within the organization refers you to that role, the chances of you getting a call is highly likely versus you applying online. Because when you apply online, your resume goes through ATS, right? And when it goes to ATS, it will never show the recruiter that there is someone with the right skill set, right attitude, and wants to make a career in FP&A, because it's going to only filter prior experience, which the recruiter wants. So that's how if I were you, that's how I would do it.
Got it. So networking and being a little adaptable to the role, maybe you may not be able to get a senior role or the same level if you want to make that change, which is okay for maybe a couple of years, and then you can make up in the long term.
And again, I think I'm not talking about people with 20 years experience. I'm talking about people with 3 to 5 years of experience. Other thing that people forget is when they transition from FP&A, from audit to FP&A, and they also screw up interviews sometime, is that they expect the growth that they get in Big Four or they get in an audit field is going to be the same as industry. It doesn't happen. I was mentioning it during our conversation that some of my friends who continued in audit after their chartered accountancy have already made directors and partners, right? While I am not close to a CFO anytime soon. Right. And you also have to understand that your career growth is going to be much, much slower. You're probably not going to make a CFO ever in your life. And that's okay. If that's something that is okay with you. For me, maybe it's fine. I mean, or for you, it's fine, but for some, it might not be. So think about that before you jump into the bandwagon of, moving into FP&A.
Got it. And also that depends on the size of the organization. So if you're working
Yeah,
with very big organization, you may never make a CFO. Or you may never make it until your mid 50s or maybe mid 40s.
absolutely. Absolutely.
For a mid-sized organization, probably you might make it earlier. So it depends on the size of the organization. And also, I mean, I also know people who started with me and now are partners, and I also know people who started me and are still managers or senior managers, which is very
Yeah,
similar you're doing, or maybe even one level lower than what we are doing. It all depends on, I mean, your performance after senior manager. So it depends on
yeah.
how. In Big Fours also, it's now difficult. It is not as easy as it was maybe 10 years or 5 years back to become
Mhm.
partners. There are only limited numbers of partners they can hire, and admit. I mean, a lot of people get to that assistant director or what they call the associate
Maybe.
director.
Yeah,
A lot of competition there, and it all depends on how much business you can bring in, how much. I mean, it all depends on how good you are in
yeah,
market. I mean, again,
yeah.
it brings back to communication and sales and
Yeah,
marketing skills.
I think you've touched a very interesting point, Asif, because what happens is, when you're growing very fast, right? You only think about the money. You don't think about a long-term picture. You think about how in 2 years I'm going to make senior manager and then AD and then whatever, the director, etc., etc. But after a certain point in time, because of the pyramid, there are only going to be so many roles. And when they stop moving, then they realize, oh no, I need to now move to industry. By then they have spent substantial time, and they have not developed any of the skills which might be needed in industry. Of course, they can get into auditing, accounting, and compliance related roles in a industry also, but those roles are very few. So I always think that do not think of the short term. I'll tell you my example personally, right? When I got into Coca-Cola, there was another local conglomerate, like Indian conglomerate, that I got an offer from in my campus. Okay. And of course, I had a job in Deloitte. The job in Deloitte was pretty much paying me the same money as Coca-Cola was giving. And the other company, it was paying me almost double of what was paying. Okay. And I had all three like jobs in my hand, but I still decided to go with Coca-Cola and the management trainee program because the other organization was not giving me management trainee. It would put me into an audit role or an accounting role straight away. And it was a very tough decision at the start of my career when, leaving double the money and getting into a lower paying job. And, but thankfully, I was smart enough at that point in time to look at the big picture, and uh, there's not been any turning back, and I don't in fact regret a single bit about doing that. And a couple of my friends who chose money at the start over better roles, I have seen them being like in a lot of challenge in finding good jobs after that role, or moving careers, etc., etc. So I would say, like, it's important to spend time with yourself and understand what you want to do, and then decide. Either is fine, but you should not have the regret that, if I would have done that, I would have been happier.
So now, what I will do is I'll take some questions on how after you joined or after you moved to FP&A, what are few things that people should do? So, is there some training or is there some uh, certification which is required, or did you do any particular training after you transitioned from your role at, I mean, Deloitte, Nestle, to Mars and Amazon? So, did you do any training, and do you recommend any training certification for FP&A?
Personally, for me, I hated studying, so no, I actually didn't do any training. I think FP&A is a very hands-on role.
Yeah,
Depending on where you want your career to be and what are the different things you want to do. Uh, you can take certain certifications, like for example, because I when I was doing commercial finance, I was doing a lot of pricing and a lot of performance review and the right mix to sell in the market. So I took a pricing course from MIT. Did it directly impact my career? No. So, and if you ask me personally, I feel it is important to spend the time in the function, then take certification, because
yeah.
honestly, no one cares. As long as you know your basics like Excel, PowerPoint, you can learn some visualization software like Tableau, Power BI. You can learn how to code if you really, want to grow fast as an analyst or get a job as an analyst, you can learn how to code and extract data from data lake or Snowflake or things like that. How to synthesize large amount of data into meaningful dashboards and things like that. That's going to be more helpful than getting a degree, because nobody really cares about the degree in FP&A.
Certification may not be that useful, but whatever you're doing right now, as you mentioned, like you were working on a certain project on pricing, doing a course or maybe a short thing on that would be useful. Like you're working on, say, data, maybe a short course on Power BI will be more useful than a
Or data visualization, even Excel, advanced Excel for that matter. When we are working, we mostly use very, very simple Excel, VLOOKUP, pivot, etc., etc. But how can you take it to the next level? That itself would be helpful. So it will really depend on, at what stage of career you are in. Like right now, because I lead transformation, for me, it is important to know Tableau, Power BI, and things like that. Even though I don't do it like myself, but just to know the software is important to get the work done from others. So that's something that you can look at.
Now, if somebody is new to FP&A role, say somebody has joined your team under you, what would you recommend them to do in their first few days, or maybe first 60 days, 90 days? Is there a plan that you share? Is there something that you would want that person to undergo in those first few months, so we don't feel, because they have made a change from a different profile, don't feel too, or they have something that they can follow?
I'm actually going to tell you what I tell my team or what I have done in all the changes that I've made. I think first 30 days should be about learning the business. Like, meet as many people as you can, right from the length and breadth of the organization. If you work in a manufacturing, go to a factory, sit with the guys on the shop floor, understand the business. Okay, understand the process. When I say process, not just FP&A, but every other process that you can get hold of. Of course, I don't mean to say how to pass an accounting entry, but it doesn't harm you if you go and sit with the accounting team and understand the business cycle. So understand the process, understand the business cycle, meet the team, review your past data, look at all the files that are currently being used in the FP&A team, just to understand, how are the things done. And lastly, in the first 30 days, set your goal for the next 1 year. Like, what do you want to achieve from this role? After you have done all of this in the first 30 days, because it can take a bit of time, and you are just starting out, so learning the business and meeting the team can take some time. Next 30 days, take a bit of the current project, like whatever you're going to do, and start doing it. Look at the complex models that are there and see if there's a way for you to simplify it. Start building that cross-functional collaboration. If you see something that you can help, go to the cross-functional team and meet them and sit with them and ask them, is there a project that I can help you on? That, because a lot of our role is about working with other people, right? So I think, if you can build that connect in the first 60 days, your role will be really, really successful, and you'll be able to over deliver on the role. And then after you've done this on all 60 in the first 60 days, that's when in the next 30 days you start taking your role, like you start taking responsibility. Now you start taking the P&L to manage, start providing insights into the business, like strategic insights, start providing feedback if you think something is not right, something can be done better, and keep reviewing, keep planning ahead, keep sharing your insights with the business, keep asking for feedback. I think, what we don't do usually is that we ask for feedback. So if your manager doesn't provide feedback, ask somebody else to give you feedback. Go to your business partners and ask for feedback. So I think, if I have to summarize, first 30 days, learn the business, meet the team, understand the process, review historical data, and set goals. The next 30 days, start engaging in current projects, try and develop some, let's say, better way of doing things, develop cross-functional collaboration. And then the last 30 days, or let's say the rest of the year or rest of the time, start taking ownership, providing feedback, providing better ways of doing things, insights, and then reviewing, getting feedback, doing things better. That's how I would summarize it.
I think you've summed it pretty well. So thank you so much. I know we are on time and maybe a few minutes over.
I can take a few minutes. It's okay.
Perfect. So we will do the last question, and then we'll wrap up. So if I have to ask you today, and if there's somebody you are interviewing for your team, what are the few questions or maybe couple of questions you will definitely ask, apart from the general ones, like tell me something about yourself,
Of
or
course.
uh, you want to make sure that the person is the right fit for your team, and
Yeah.
also the person has the technical understanding of FP&A which you want to teach them on the role. So what are the few questions that you would particularly ask them?
Yeah. And I'm going to talk about the questions which I would typically ask anybody, okay, whether they are moving from FP&A to FP&A or moving from audit / accounting to FP&A, because that will show me how much they want the role. First question is going to be, let's say, if I have to put it, and if I'm interviewing you, I would ask you, in your view, what are some of the key financial metrics or indicators that are essential to our industry, let's say FMCG industry, or you're doing it for Heinz, and how would you do it? Like, how would you monitor and report on this? That's going to be my first question from anybody, because it doesn't matter if you have worked in FP&A. Anybody who comes for a role would have read the balance sheet, would read the P&L, would have researched about the industry. For me, it will show that. The second question that I would ask is, how do you stay informed about the latest trends, right? About business, about industry, about macroeconomic factors, and how do you sort of integrate those trends in your ways of working? Now, for example, it doesn't matter whether you're coming from accounting or auditing or FP&A. Everyone has a way of integrating the latest learning that they see from within the industry, whether it is through Excel, whether it is through business accruals, whether it is through bad debt recovery. I can give you multiple examples. There are multiple examples that the interviewee can give to show that they can integrate their recent knowledge, their industry trend into their ways of working, right? And thirdly, I would ask them, how do they handle uncertainties in financial data? And what I mean by this is basically, you will be thrown with random challenges, and how would you will always not get the same. Let's say, for example, when you're auditing, you will not always get the same format, and tomorrow you have the review with partner. They could use that as an example and show me how did they handle this uncertainty, and that would still be fine, because in FP&A also you will have a lot of uncertainty when it comes to business, when it comes to data. Sometimes you will get complete information, sometimes not. So how do you handle that? So I think these three questions, irrespective of where you're coming from, can really give an insight of whether the person is going to be a right fit for my team or not.
I really like the third one, the ambiguity question. So you can get a sense of how does the person feel in those type of situations, and because
Yeah,
those situations will come up frequently. So I think that brings us to the end of this interview, and thank you so much again for joining us. I'm sure this will go into a lot of places, as I mentioned, and it'll help a lot of people. So again, thank you so much for your time.
I'm glad I could be of help.